Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and I want to encourage and inspire you to grow more of your own food in whatever space you have available. And I do this by sharing exactly what I've been doing on my own allotment, my own kitchen garden here in Littlehampton, West Sussex in the UK. I've been growing my own for over 30 years now and I still learn something new every single day. Now, coming up in this week's podcast, I have got a really big update from the allotment, which has done me a lot of good. We've also got our seed of the month, and back in the podding shed, you'll find out what other seeds we can sow throughout August. So, without much ado, let's get into it, shall we? Well, I'm here on the allotment. This is the first weekend in August, really early August, and by now most of our allotments, most of our kitchen gardens are starting to look very, very dry. Lots of yellowing of our plants is going on. That's a sign that summer is well here. Everything is just looking very, very dry. And that's certainly the case here on the allotment. However, the allotment has really served a good need today. Now, over the last few weeks, you would have heard on this podcast that I've been having some work going on at home. Started with my driveway, and it has developed and grown from a 2-week job to something that has now been 6 weeks and still going on. Drains have had to be replaced, etc., etc. It's been basically mentally draining, trying to work my way around it, trying to work at the same time, trying to do this podcast and trying to grow my own food. It's been a challenge. It really has been a challenge. Now, it's been the same for my wife, and of course my wife works from home, so it's been harder for her as well. But this Saturday, I just turned around to my wife and said, I'm going to the allotment for the day. I need it for my own mental health. And she was fine with that. She sort of agreed with me. So that's what I did. I came down to the allotment this morning and I've just spent the entire day working on my allotment. Not really doing anything particular, I'll get into that in just a moment, but really just enjoying what an allotment is about. There's something about the allotment that just adds a bit of escape, and that is what I love about having my allotment. Bit of escapism, we're away from technology. All we can do is concentrate on the tasks in hand, be with nature, just enjoy being out in the open air. So what have I done? Well, first of all, I started with a good tidy up with the strimmer and the lawnmower, and I just trimmed all the grass down. Now, the grass is growing much slower at the moment. As I said earlier, it's starting to look very, very brown, well, with it being the middle of summer. But autumn is on its way as well, and hopefully we will get some showers soon. We actually did get some really heavy thunder and lightning with heavy showers the other day, which did help the grass spring into life a bit, which is why I think I've had to cut the grass. So anyway, as I was cutting the grass, I suddenly noticed there was a buzzing going on around my head and something constantly hitting my head. It was either a bee or a wasp, and then all of a sudden I noticed there was a couple more, and they were basically attacking me. What I didn't realise is that I had unfortunately disturbed a wasp's nest without knowing. And the wasps were quite rightly angry and took it out on me. I got stung on my ear, stung on my nose, stung down on my t-shirt and my armpits, and it wasn't very pleasant. I haven't been stung by a wasp for a long time. You forget just how painful it is. But yeah, being stung was not pleasant. This wasp's nest I didn't know was there, but now I know it's there. I know to be a bit careful around that area. The panic was I could feel the wasps climbing inside my ear hole, which wasn't pleasant at all. But as I've always said, this is one of the things we have to tolerate on an allotment or working with nature. Nature can be against us sometimes. We just have to take the rough with the smooth. But with the grass areas tidied up, I then continued doing a bit of weeding. Now, I've been practicing something that I've heard a lot of people talk about lately, and that is something called chop and drop. Now, the idea of chop and drop is that when you are weeding or pruning, everything that you are removing, you place back on the ground. So if you dig up a weed, you place it on top of the soil. If you prune a tree, you place that pruning on the soil. And the idea being it will rot in situ and it will give up some of that moisture into the soil, and all the nutrients from that piece that you have placed on top of the soil will leach back into the soil. Now I thought I'd give it a try in one of my beds and just see how much it makes a difference, whether it actually works or not. So I've been doing a bit of that as well as the normal taking my weeds off for composting, trying to build and produce enough compost that we don't have to buy any in. As you know, I like to use compost as a mulch where I can. The trouble is, if you don't have enough compost can be expensive, which is why we've been using a lot of straw this year. Got to say, straw, and I've spoken about this so many times in the past, straw has been a real saving point. The area underneath any of the straw beds is really nice and damp, so I think moving forward I will definitely be using straw a lot more. Now, talking of straw areas, I actually went to one of my potato beds, the first early potato beds. A few weeks ago I actually removed all the potatoes from there and I've planted up some cabbages in there, all of which seem to be doing well, but I've just given it a double check to make sure there was no potatoes left in the soil. The cabbages in there seem to be doing quite happy, and we're now moving on with emptying the second early potatoes. Which is good, because we do find that we usually grow too many potatoes for our use. But this year I think we've got it just about right. We've got plenty of first early potatoes, we've got second earlies, and then our main crops. The plants on those are still growing quite well. They're starting to yellow, showing signs that they'll soon be dying down, which is about right, because August, September is when we would normally be looking at harvesting our main crop potatoes. I like to see how long we can leave it for to try and make sure the potatoes get the maximum amount of growth possible. But for me, I think it is looking positive. I think we're going to get some good main crop potatoes this year, which we'll store quite easily. Now, in terms of harvests, because I do like to share my harvests at the moment, we've obviously harvested a few more potatoes. We've had cauliflowers, cabbages, tomatoes, cucumbers, rhubarb. We've done really well once again with all our harvests that we have got coming in. So I'm very happy with everything. Plenty of harvests. My place is looking tidier. Mentally, I feel so much better after just spending the entire day on the allotment. This is one of those things, I wouldn't say my mental health was struggling with this. It's more a case that I've been unable to sort of think clearly because I've got this driveway project playing on in the back of my mind. It makes me wonder how people cope with building houses as a project. Having this allotment has just given me that space to escape. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Space to escape. Right, well that is it from the allotment today. I'm going to head on home and I will meet you back in the propagation shed where we're going to be talking about our seed of the month. What is it? Find out in just a moment. Well, it's that time of the podcast where I just interrupt and ask if you would be good enough, if you are enjoying this podcast, to leave a rate and review on your podcast provider. Only takes you a few seconds, but it means well to us and it helps us get found by more people who might also be interested in learning more about how to grow their own food. But not only that, if you are also enjoying this podcast, you want to help support the work that we do, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. By becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club, you help keep this podcast running, you keep the wheels turning. It really does help, and I cannot thank anybody enough who has signed up. For just £5 a month it costs to be a member, you get access to extra behind-the-scenes podcasts, give you a bit of an idea what's going on here at the Veg Grower Podcast HQ. Not only that, you also get once a month our monthly seed pack, which consists of a few packets of seeds that can be sown in that very month and a copy of our mini newspaper. The seeds alone are worth more than £5, so I think it is an absolute bargain, and you help support the work that we do. Now, we've just sent off this month's seed pack, so everybody that is a member, those seeds are coming through the door, and it's a good pack, a good selection of seeds that we're going to be sowing throughout August. I selected the seeds so they can be sown in that very month, so they're not hanging around waiting to be sown. They are ready to go in that very month. If that sounds like something you would be interested in, then please head to the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk to find out more and hopefully sign up. We'd love to have you there. Right, with that, let's get back to the gardening. Well, I'm here in my propagation shed, this shed that I've spoken a lot about over the last few weeks. One of my pride and joys at the moment. But the main reason I have this shed is, of course, as I said many times before, is to start off my seeds and grow my young plants. And because it is the beginning of August, we, of course, have our monthly feature of the seed of the month. Now, this month, August, is generally a slow month, and people don't really generally think about sowing seeds throughout August. But, as I've always said, when it comes to growing our own food, we need to eat all year round. And that means we also need to sow seeds all year round as well. So what have I selected for this month? Well, I've selected something that actually popped up in conversation a couple of weeks ago, pak choi. Now, if you've never heard of pak choi is a fast-growing leafy brassica, perfect for autumn/winter cropping. Absolutely delicious in stir fries, salads. One of my favourite things to use pak choi in is Thai green curry. Now, one of the reasons that I've selected pak choi for August is because I find August is the ideal time to sow it. Now, because it's cooler, especially in the evenings, it helps reduce bolting on pak choi. But the great advantage is that it's still warm enough for pak choi to grow before winter, before it gets too cold. So it is, for me, the ideal time to sow this delicious brassica. Now, I tend to sow mine in plug plants, as I always do. I fill my plug plant trays up with seed compost. I dip one single seed into each plug plant, about a centimetre deep, and then leave that into my autopot trays and wait for them to germinate. But we could, of course, sow them directly in the garden where they are to go. Ideally, you want about 20 centimetres of space between each seed. But you can actually grow them a little bit closer if you want to grow them for baby leaf salads. Now, ideally, pak choi needs fertile, well-drained soil, or you can grow them in large pots as well. So you've got plenty of options to grow these in. Now, because I'm sowing them this weekend and inside my potting shed, I will probably get these outside in about 2 weeks' time. Pak choi can grow incredibly fast. In fact, we could be harvesting these throughout September. So it's very, very fast growing crop, which is another reason I think they are great to grow. But when I put them out in their plug plants, of course, again, 20 centimetres of space between each plant, and I'll just drop them in and give them a good watering. Now, once they are planted, they will need consistent watering. We really don't want these plants to get stressed, because that can encourage them to bolt. So consistent watering, maybe not every day, but just ensuring that the soil stays moist. And of course, adding a mulch, straw, compost, etc., will help keep those roots cool and keep them moist as well. And one of the other things that might be worth doing is adding a mesh or netting or something to keep away flea beetle or the cabbage butterflies, etc., that do like to eat on these. You'll probably be okay, but it's something to consider at the same time. And that's it. That's all we have to do. Keep them consistently moist. In terms of feeding, because they're a quick crop and providing you've got fertile soil with plenty of organic matter already added, they don't need much in the way of feed. But within 3 to 4 weeks, you can be picking the baby leaves if that's what you're after, but the full heads will grow in 6 to 8 weeks. So quite a quick crop, as I've already said. And to harvest them, if you're picking the baby leaves, just pick the outer leaves. But if you're picking as a full head, you just cut them off at the base and off you go. That's it. Now, one of the things that I like to do, I like to mix them up. I do like to grow some as a baby leaf, and I like to grow some for full head. So I do grow quite a few more plants than what I think I need. But added to that, it's also well worth just sowing them quite regularly so that you get a steady supply all autumn. Little and often, so perhaps once a week sow another batch. That's what I do, and that's how I will be doing it throughout August. That way we can keep them going for quite a bit longer. I'd probably also sow them into September, but once we get into October, it might be a little bit too late. Now, I've already said they can grow in the ground, they can grow in containers, they can grow in pots, they can grow in a veggie pod. So they're a really good plant for multi-uses. And they're good for filling in spaces that have become available. Like many of our crops at the moment, it's all about filling in those spaces that are becoming more and more available. Right. Well, that is how we are growing pak choi, our seed of the month. You can, of course, check out the links on the blog post if you want to buy pak choi from Premier Seeds or some of our other suppliers that we recommend. Please do go check them out. Please do follow the links if you want to find out more. Right, with that, it's now time to find out what Chef Scott has for us this week.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef Scott with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
Hi, it's Scott here with this week's recipe, and this week we have cauliflower pakoras. Or you could use the same recipe and swap the cauliflower for other vegetables or a mix of other vegetables. So let's not delay and head to the kitchen and hear how it's made. As usual, you can find this recipe and others on the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk and on my Instagram page, Seed to Table Plot 13. For this recipe, you will need 400 grams of cauliflower chopped into small florets, 150 grams of gram flour, 170 grams of water, 10 grams of chopped coriander, 5 grams of chopped mint, 1 teaspoon of ground cumin, 1 teaspoon of garam masala, half a teaspoon of Kashmiri chili powder, half a teaspoon of baking powder, and 1.5 teaspoons of curry powder. Method: whisk all the spices, baking powder, gram flour and water together, and then add the cauliflower, and then shallow or deep fry by adding spoons of the mixture to the oil, and cook for a couple of minutes until crispy. And that's the recipe done, and that's it from me this week.
Well, anybody that knows me will know how much I love Indian recipes, so I'm very grateful once again to Chef Scott for that delicious recipe. I cannot actually wait to give this a try. Of course, the recipe is on the website. Now, I've mentioned many times today that we are here in August, and I've also mentioned that August isn't generally thought of a month for sowing seeds, but I always believe that we need to sow seeds all the time in order to keep our food coming in. And there's plenty of seeds that we can still sow. And many of these seeds will actually either give us quick crops or be giving us crops throughout the winter and into spring. So where do we start? Well, I think first of all, we should start with the salad leaf crops, which is something I do grow a lot of. We do eat a lot of salads. So things like spinach and lettuce and mizuna or mustards and things like that, I do think are always worth sowing. They can be sown in modules, in the ground, under cover, in greenhouses, although it might get a bit warm in greenhouses for some of these crops. They are certainly something well worth sowing. Now, I would say that I will be sowing all these outside because I'm in the south coast of the UK, where it's still going to be relatively warm throughout the month. But if you are in cooler parts of the country, you might need to bring them indoors, or at least have them in trays that can easily be brought indoors if it does suddenly drop in temperature. Added to that, of course, oriental leaves, things like pak choi that we've already mentioned and things like mizuna. There's a lot of choices when it comes to that. There's even oriental seed leaf mixes or salad mixes that can be bought online. These can be sown in late summer into September. Really good for winter crops as well. Rocket, of course. Rocket is one that I do also like to grow a lot of. Absolutely delicious, especially wild rocket. Lovely peppery flavour. Fresh leaves, really nice. Really add a nice little kick. And actually, if we sow them now, they will give us a crop of fresh leaves before the winter, but then they can lie dormant until March, when it will just suddenly put on a load of fresh growth as well. Salad rocket, which is different to wild rocket, also stands the best chance of surviving frosts if sown in late August. So well worth trying as well. Often you will find it bolts in April, but that's still a long way off at the moment. Corn salad actually is one that I sow a lot of lately, also known as lamb's lettuce. Another really delicious leafy crop, full of a lot of vitamins and minerals as well, so really healthy for you. Very shallow roots, so it does need watering quite regularly. But again, another quick one to grow and one that we really enjoy growing. Moving on from that, up until October, we can still sow spring onions. Now, there are some varieties of spring onions that are best sown at this time of year, some that are best for growing over winter as well. Again, spring onions are something I do grow a lot of. We try and sow quite a few of these and keep a load going all the time. Now, spring onions generally don't germinate well if the temperature is above 20 degrees C. So, if it's fairly cool, which I think August is going to be, you should do okay sowing these throughout the month. Go check your seed boxes, see how many salad onions you've got or spring onions, and sow those. The seeds generally don't last for long, so it's a good opportunity to use them up. Now, sticking with onions, something else that I sow throughout August would be some of the overwintering onions, often known as Japanese onions, those sort of onion seeds. These are going to be our overwintered onions, which we would be harvesting around the middle of next year. Often we will grow those from sets when we buy them when they become available in garden centres towards September, October time. But we can get a bit of a head start by sowing them from seed this month, and that's something I recommend. Turnips are another great one to sow too. Now, turnips, bit of a weird flavour, not everybody likes them. We can actually harvest these right up until December, but they can be sown up until the middle of August, so you get a good chance to get these in the ground now. Again, use up those turnip seed packets that you may have, fill them up into some empty spots that you may have in your garden or allotment, and off you go. As easy as that. Well, they are a bit of a required flavour, I guess you could say, but they are a food crop nonetheless. Now, chicory and radicchio, this is something I've been growing a lot more of lately. It's quite a bitter tasting crop, but they are delicious. And I also think they look really good in the bed as well. We've got some radicchio growing in our garden, the Polo Rosso at the moment, which just looks stunning. It's a bitter flavour to it, but it is absolutely lovely. Good thing is we can harvest this right up until March as well. So well worth sowing, little and often, making sure you spread out the sowing so you have plenty of these all year round again. Let's not forget cabbages as well, something we sowed last month and we will continue sowing as well. Winter cabbages, they can be harvested from November to February. Spring cabbages as well from April to August. So get some sowings in now, could be winter or spring depending on what varieties you have available, but really well worth sowing those and getting those into the ground. Now, when it comes to winter cabbages, it might be a little bit too late, but there's no harm in trying and just seeing how you get on. Now, chard is something I also sow a lot of. We can sow that from March to November, and it's another really good one I've found for growing over winter. Adds a bit of colour to the plot, but it is also pretty hardy. I like the yellows and the reds and the whites and all the different colours of chard that are available. But I also like the fact that it is a leafy crop. The chickens seem to love it as well, so it's good to add a bit of green nutrition to our chickens at times as well, but also to fill in any gaps that become available. Kohlrabi is another one that we're going to be sowing this month as well. Another root crop similar to turnips, but I feel kohlrabi has a better flavour. It looks like an alien crop with the way it grows, but it is absolutely delicious. It's used a lot in the Indian dishes too, so this is one that I really, really enjoy. Then, of course, we have got things like chilies. Now, you might think it's the wrong time of year to sow chilies, but something I've done in the past is actually sown chili seeds in August, got them growing, and then I've overwintered them to get them through the winter. And that's worked out rather well in the past as well. And another seed that I think it is always worth sowing at this time of year, if you've got the space, is green manures. Now, I'm a big fan of growing green manures, as I've said time and time again. I try and use green manures as part of my crop rotation and a way of ensuring that my soil never goes bare. So green manures are on my list. And in fact, I think I will be sowing some of the green manures that I use for my potato beds over the next few weeks in order to fill up those potato beds ready for next year. So where next year's potatoes are going, those beds are going to have green manures in ready for next year. But they are just basically something that we sow in place of crops to look after the soil. One of the worst things I've always said we can do is have bare soil. Green manures just fill in that gap rather nicely. So what I'm saying is there's lots of seeds that we can sow throughout this month. There's lots more that are available. It does depend where you live, of course. In the northern parts, it's a little bit harder. But where I am here on the south coast, we've got plenty choice of what we can still sow. Go give them a go. Let me know what you're sowing this month as well. It's always good to hear back whatever people are saying. Now, we are coming to the end of this week's podcast, I'm afraid. It seems to have flown by this week, but as always, it's always been a pleasure doing these podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. If you have enjoyed this podcast, then please do leave us a rate and review on your podcast provider. Only takes you a few seconds, but it really means the world to us, and it helps us get found by more people who might also be interested in growing their own food. Now, I've actually had quite a few comments come in over this last week, believe it or not. We've had over on, well, they're all on Spotify actually. Henry Tyrrell says, "Hi Richard, I've been researching composting and mulching and found your podcast very interesting. I've also tried straw ridging with the addition of grass clippings to help balance the CN ratio, carbon-nitrogen ratio. One thing I've found is with too much straw is that it can use a lot of nitrogen from the soil to break down and therefore reducing available nitrogen for plants. Have you looked into this? I have found slug populations are ramping up where I have mulched now after a few rain spells. How's yours?" Yeah, we have been noticing more and more slugs lately, actually. But again, it's not unexpected. I just try and go out there quite regularly and try and feed those slugs and snails to my chickens to tackle them. It's not a huge problem at the moment, but again, encouraging birds help deal with that. With regards to the nitrogen, I've not noticed it myself, but I've never actually done any tests to see how much nitrogen is in my soil. So I'm not overly worried at the moment, but of course I do try and add nitrogen when we add compost as well later on in the year when the straw mulch comes back. So we'll do a test one day on how much nitrogen is in the soil and see how it is affected by having a straw mulch. Highly scientific there, but it'd be worth trying. On another episode, somebody called Mummy has said, "Hi Richard, I'm new to growing veg, having inherited a kitchen garden when we moved in January. I find that I blag my way through veg growing on a weekly basis, and then your podcast confirms that I'm on the right track because you did the same things I did that week too. In particular, June overwhelm and last week's removing of netting from brassicas to release trapped butterflies. Can you ask Chef Scott for a recipe on patty pan squash, please? Becky." Yeah, that's one of the things I've often told is that some of the things I talk about on the podcast is actually what people are doing as well. So it seems to run in time. And this is one of the reasons that I built this podcast is that I feel that Some people who are inexperienced or unsure just need a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of confirmation that they're not doing anything wrong. Although I always say, nobody really does anything wrong in the gardening world. We just all do things differently. With regards to the patty pan squash, I've asked Chef Scott about that. It might be a couple of weeks away, but he's going to come up with something in the not too distant future. Now, moving on from that, I said there was quite a few coming out this week. And Lynn has said, "Hi, Richard. I've kept chickens for 25 years now. My biggest tip is to avoid red spider mite and do not have a wooden coop. My coop is from Sowing Recycling. It is fantastic. Removable floor for easy cleaning. Designs are so good and easy to power wash. Delivered all ready to go as well. Every year I hatch some eggs in a small incubator. From seeing the hearts beating in the air, watching them hatch, they grow up and finally lay eggs is totally brilliant." Lynn. So again, I cannot disagree. The plastic, I know plastic has got a bit of a dirty word in gardening, but plastic is so much better for the chickens and so much easier to keep clean. So I'm totally with you on these chicken coops. I'll pass that on to Kate, who was asking about how to keep chickens as well. The idea of hatching, as I've said, I'm always worried about hatching some cockerels. So I've not done that myself, but it's something I've got to admit I would be interested in doing. I did used to, of course, hatch quail, which was always fun. We didn't worry too much about having male quail then, but we haven't done that for a while. I sometimes think about going back to quail, but lots of other things that happened. Now, NB-IP, which I believe is Natalie, if I'm not mistaken, she's also said, "Hi Richard, sorry to hear about Bear. It hurts to lose a pet." Yes, unfortunately she has passed away over this last week. As I said last week, she was holding on in there. The poor thing. Anyway, I enjoy your honesty about the ups and downs in life. I come under Thames Water and so am affected by the hose pipe ban. I avoid using a hose at home and they are not allowed on my plot, so the impact hasn't been great. But I often wonder, as we try to save water, why we are asked to wash recyclables. Surely they would be crushed, melted, etc., and a few crumbs couldn't hurt. I use grey water to wash them, but wondered why, if you knew why. It's a good question. It's not one that I've actually ever thought about, in all honesty. Why would we need to wash out recyclables? My guess is that some people, I guess the recyclables, ours is only collected every couple of weeks, and I guess if you've got something really dirty in it, it might smell, it might attract vermin. So I guess the real thing about cleaning it is to stop those things out. But it does seem a bit of a waste of water. But again, I come back to the fact that I think we are very wasteful in water anyway. For something like that, we could use rainwater to wash out our recyclables, and that wouldn't be any harm, would it? It's not like we're going to be eating from that. Something to think about there. Thank you very much for that question. I will look into that a bit more actually and find out what is the real reason why we need to wash our recyclables. But thank you so much to everybody that has left a review, all on Spotify. I haven't seen any. I've had a rating on iTunes, but I haven't seen any more. But if anybody does have any rating and review, please do leave that on your podcast provider. It really helps form this podcast and gives us a few ideas on what you guys are wanting to hear about as well. Also, if you enjoyed this podcast, you want to help support the work that we do, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. Details on that at the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. If you want to get in touch, you can still visit our website, theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. You can leave a comment on the bottom of a blog post, or you could leave us a voicemail. Alternatively, you can email me, richard@theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk, and of course you can find us on social media and message us that way. Don't forget to give us a like and a follow on social media as well. We really do appreciate it. That just about takes care of everything. We will be back again next week, where I've got a few things that I want to talk about already, so looking to be an exciting week. Right guys, you take care. I'll speak to you again next time.